The poor little girl shouted desperately, "Doctor, please help him!" But when the physician examined the billionaire's son, his face turned pale. This child has been poisoned. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The scorching afternoon sun beat down on Riverside Park as 7-year-old Lucy Martinez searched through the trash bins for anything valuable. Her worn sneakers, 3 sizes too big, slapped against the cracked pavement as she moved from bench to bench. Most people hurried past her, avoiding eye contact with the small girl, whose clothes told the story of countless nights on the streets. But Lucy wasn't like most homeless children. Behind her tired brown eyes lived the wisdom of her late grandmother Elena, a renowned curandera who had taught her the ancient secrets of healing before succumbing to illness 2 years ago. "Mija," her grandmother used to whisper, "your hands carry magic, and your heart sees what others cannot." Nay! As Lucy rounded the corner near the playground, she froze. A small boy with neatly combed blonde hair lay motionless beside the swing set, his expensive clothes a stark contrast to the dirt beneath him. His lips had turned an unusual shade of blue-purple, and his breathing was shallow and labored. "Hey, wake up!" Lucy dropped to her knees beside him, her small hands instinctively checking his pulse the way her grandmother had taught her. The boy's skin felt cold and clammy, and there was a strange, bitter smell on his breath, something that made her stomach clench with recognition. Without hesitation, Lucy scooped the boy into her arms, surprised by how light he felt. She had carried her grandmother many times when the old woman was too weak to walk, so this 7-year-old was manageable, even for her small frame. "St. Mary's Hospital!" she panted as she ran, remembering the large building 6 blocks away. People stared as the raggedly dressed girl sprinted through the streets, clutching an unconscious child who clearly didn't belong to her world. "Help! Somebody help!" Lucy burst through the emergency room doors, her voice cutting through the typical hospital chaos. "This boy is dying! Doctor!" Sarah Mitchell, a veteran emergency physician, rushed over immediately. One look at the child's symptoms sent alarms through her medical training. "Get me a gurney, now!" she barked to the nurses. "What happened to him?" she asked Lucy while checking the boy's vitals. "I found him in the park," Lucy gasped, still catching her breath. "But doctor, I think—" "Honey, step back and let us work," Dr. Mitchell interrupted, not unkindly, but with the urgency of someone trying to save a life. As the medical team wheeled the boy into the treatment room, Lucy watched through the window. Dr. Mitchell was drawing blood, running tests, her face growing more concerned by the minute. After what felt like hours, the doctor emerged, her expression grim. "This child has been poisoned," Dr. Mitchell announced to her colleague. "The blood work shows traces of oleander extract combined with something else I can't identify. It's extremely rare and highly sophisticated." Lucy's heart nearly stopped. She knew that combination. Her grandmother had warned her about it many times. It was called La Muerte Silenciosa, the silent death, a poison so rare that only someone with deep knowledge of toxic plants would know how to create it. But as Dr. Mitchell continued discussing treatment options with increasing desperation, Lucy realized something terrifying. They were treating it wrong. The standard protocols wouldn't work for this particular combination. She had seen her grandmother neutralize this exact poison once before, when a rival curandera had tried to kill her. That's when the hospital doors burst open, and a tall, well-dressed man in an expensive suit rushed in, his face wild with panic. "Where's my son? Where's Jake Thompson?" he demanded. Marcus Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries, had never felt so powerless in his life. His normally perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his tie askew, and his hands shook as he demanded answers from everyone in scrubs. The man who controlled a billion-dollar empire was completely helpless when it came to saving his most precious treasure. "Mr. Thompson, Please calm down, Doctor. Mitchell approached him carefully, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Your son, Jake, is in critical condition. We believe he's been poisoned with a rare plant extract. Poisoned? Marcus's voice cracked, the word feeling foreign and impossible on his tongue. How is that possible? He was with his nanny at the park. Helena's been with our family for 3 years. She loves Jake like her own son. Lucy watched from the corner, where a nurse had gently guided her, still clutching her worn backpack against her chest. Through the treatment room window, she could see Jake's small body connected to multiple machines, tubes running into his arms, his face pale as winter snow. The monitors beeped frantically, telling a story of a little boy fighting for his life. The standard treatments aren't working, Doctor. Mitchell continued, her voice heavy with concern and professional frustration. We've contacted poison control, several specialists from Johns Hopkins, even called the CDC. But this combination is unlike anything we've encountered in 20 years of emergency medicine. DeMarcus began pacing like a caged animal, his expensive Italian shoes squeaking against the hospital linoleum. Money is no object. Fly in specialists from anywhere in the world, charter jets, hire the best doctors. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Mitchell interrupted gently, this isn't about money. We simply don't have enough time to wait for outside help. Jake's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Lucy took a deep breath and stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the adult conversation. Excuse me, sir? Marcus barely glanced at her, his attention focused on barking orders into his phone at various assistants. Not now, sweetheart. This is very serious. But I know what's wrong with your son, Lucy persisted, her voice growing stronger with each word. The doctors are treating him wrong. They're giving him medicine that won't help. Dr. Mitchell looked down at the small girl with tired kindness, the way medical professionals learn to speak to children in crisis situations. Honey, we really appreciate that you brought Jake in. You probably saved his life by getting him here so quickly, but medicine is very complicated. It's la muerte silenciosa, Lucy interrupted, the Spanish words falling from her lips like an ancient prayer her grandmother had taught her. The silent death. Oleander mixed with castor beans and something else, probably foxglove. My grandmother taught me about this exact poison. The room fell completely silent except for the steady beeping of Jake's monitors. Doctor, Mitchell's eyes widened slightly. Those were indeed the exact compounds they'd found in the blood work, plus one unidentified substance that had been puzzling the lab technicians for the past hour. Marcus finally looked directly at Lucy, seeing her clearly for the first time since he'd arrived. What he saw was a small girl with intelligent brown eyes, wearing clothes that had seen better days, but carrying herself with a dignity that spoke of inner strength. Who exactly are you? My name is Lucy Martinez, she said, meeting Marcus's intense blue eyes without flinching or looking away. I lived with my grandmother Elena until she died 2 years ago. She was a curandera, a healer. She taught me about plants and medicines and poisons because sometimes bad people use them against healers like us. Marcus knelt down to Lucy's level, his businessman instincts recognizing something authentic in this child's demeanor. In his world of corporate negotiations and million-dollar deals, he'd learned to read people quickly and accurately. This little girl wasn't lying or trying to get attention. She was dead serious. You're telling me that a 7-year-old homeless child knows something that my team of doctors, people who went to medical school for years, don't know? Mr. Thompson, Dr. Mitchell interjected gently, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to managing desperate family members. I understand your desperation, but we can't... How do you know what this poison is? Marcus asked Lucy directly, ignoring the doctor's protests. How can you be so certain? Lucy's voice became quieter, more serious, carrying a weight that no child should have to bear. Because someone tried to kill my grandmother with the same exact poison combination 2 years ago. Another curandera who was jealous of her reputation and her success. Abuela survived because she knew the counter-remedy, but it made her very, very sick for months. That's when she started teaching me everything she knew, all her remedies, all her knowledge, in case something happened to her. Dr. Mitchell looked skeptical, but curious. "Child, what makes you think this is the same poison?" Lucy pulled out a small, weathered notebook from her backpack, its pages yellowed with age and use. "Because my grandmother wrote down every symptom, every stage of the poisoning. The blue lips, the shallow breathing, the cold skin, the sweet, bitter smell on the breath. And she wrote down what the doctors tried that didn't work, exactly what you're trying now." Marcus studied Lucy's face intently. There was no deception there, no childlike fantasy or attention-seeking behavior, just desperate sincerity and knowledge that seemed impossible for someone her age. "Jake's getting worse, Doctor," Mitchell announced as monitors began beeping more urgently. "His heart rate is dropping to dangerous levels, and his respiratory system is beginning to fail. We're looking at complete organ shutdown within the next few hours." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Complete organ shutdown. His son, his brilliant, funny 7-year-old son who still believed in superheroes and wanted to be a scientist when he grew up, was dying. Marcus made a decision that went against every logical bone in his body. "Lucy, what would your grandmother have done? What would she do right now if she were here?" Lucy's eyes lit up with hope for the first time since she'd found Jake unconscious in the park. She would have made a specific tea to neutralize the poison and help his body fight back. But it has to be prepared exactly right, with exact measurements, or it won't work. Some of the plants are very dangerous if you get the amounts wrong. They could kill him faster than the poison. "This is highly irregular and potentially dangerous," Dr. Mitchell protested, her medical training warring with the reality of Jake's failing condition. "We can't let a child administer unproven remedies to a critically ill patient." "Doctor," Marcus said firmly, standing up to his full height and using the voice that had built his business empire, "you just told me my son will be dead in a few hours, and you've admitted your treatments aren't working. What exactly do I have to lose?" Lucy clutched her grandmother's notebook tighter. "I need specific plants from a botanica, a Mexican herb shop. There's one about 10 minutes from here on Roosevelt Avenue, but some of these plants are very expensive and I don't have any money." Marcus was already pulling out his phone and his platinum credit card. "Money is not a problem. I'll have my driver take you anywhere you need to go. But I'm coming with you." 28 minutes later, Lucy emerged from Botanica La Esperanza with 2 paper bags full of dried herbs, roots, and mysterious-looking flowers. Marcus had watched in complete amazement as she conversed fluently in rapid-fire Spanish with the elderly shopkeeper, describing symptoms and plant combinations with the precision of someone who had been studying herbal medicine for decades, not years. The shopkeeper, a weathered woman named Señora Rodriguez, had looked at Lucy with recognition and respect. "Tú eres la nieta de Elena, ¿verdad? She was a great healer. I can see her wisdom in your eyes, mija." Back at the hospital, Dr. Mitchell reluctantly allowed them to use a small kitchen area typically reserved for staff meal preparation. "I want to be absolutely clear," she said sternly, her medical license feeling heavy on her shoulders. "This goes against every medical protocol and ethical guideline I've ever learned. But given Jake's rapidly deteriorating condition and the fact that we're out of conventional options..." Lucy had already begun laying out her ingredients on the stainless steel counter with practiced efficiency, organizing them in a specific pattern that seemed to make sense only to her. "First, we need to prepare the base with white sage and chamomile to protect his stomach lining from the harsh medicines," she explained, measuring dried leaves with the precision of a pharmacist. Then we add hierba buena to help his liver process the toxins, and milk thistle to protect his kidneys. Marcus watched, completely transfixed, as this tiny girl worked with the confidence and knowledge of someone who had done this life-or-death preparation before. Her small hands moved with certainty, measuring and mixing with an expertise that defied her age. "Lucy," he said quietly, not wanting to break her concentration, "how did someone so young end up living completely alone on the streets?" Lucy's hands never stopped working as she spoke, grinding herbs with a small mortar and pestle she'd pulled from her backpack. "After Abuela died, social services tried to put me in foster care. The first family seemed nice when the social worker was there, but they were not kind when she left. They locked me in a closet when I cried for my grandmother, and they said I was possessed by the devil because I knew things about plants and healing." Marcus felt his heart clench with a mixture of anger and sadness. "So you ran away?" "I had to. They were going to send me to a place for troubled children, where they would make me forget everything my grandmother taught me. I couldn't let that happen. Abuela made me promise to keep her knowledge alive." Lucy looked up at him with eyes far older than her 7 years. "I've been taking care of myself for 8 months now." 8 months? The reality hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. This extraordinary child had been surviving on the streets since she was barely 6 years old, keeping herself fed and safe while preserving ancient healing knowledge. Lucy returned to her preparation, now working with what looked like ordinary dried flowers. "The foxglove is the trickiest part of the whole remedy," she explained, her voice taking on the teaching tone her grandmother had used with her. "Too little, and it won't counteract the cardiac depression caused by the oleander. Too much, and it will stop his heart completely. There's maybe a difference of 2 or 3 leaves between saving his life and killing him." Dr. Mitchell leaned in closer, her medical curiosity finally overriding her skepticism. She had to admit, this child's knowledge of plant pharmacology was more sophisticated than most medical students. "How much exactly? What's the precise dosage?" Lucy consulted her grandmother's notebook, running her small finger along faded handwriting in Spanish that looked like it had been written with great care and love. "For a child, his size and weight. Exactly 12 mature leaves, ground into the finest powder possible, mixed with the tea at exactly the moment it finishes brewing." As the tea finished its careful preparation, Jake's monitors showed he was entering complete systemic failure. His lips had turned almost black, his breathing was barely detectable, and his heart rhythm was becoming increasingly erratic. "We're losing him," Dr. Mitchell announced, with the urgency of someone who had seen too many children die. "His vital signs are crashing." Lucy grabbed the still warm cup with both hands, her face set with determination. "I need to give this to him right now, while it's still the right temperature. If it cools down too much, the medicine won't absorb properly." Getting an unconscious child to drink herbal tea should have been medically impossible, but Lucy seemed to know exactly what to do, moving with the confidence of someone who had learned from the best. She tilted Jake's head at a precise angle that kept his airway clear and used a small medical syringe. She'd asked Dr. Mitchell to slowly and carefully administer the liquid, pausing between tiny amounts to ensure he could swallow without choking. "In 20 minutes, the color should start returning to his lips," Lucy whispered, her small hand resting gently on Jake's forehead in a gesture that reminded Marcus of every mother's loving touch he'd ever seen. "In 1 hour, his breathing will get noticeably stronger and deeper. In 3 hours, if the remedy works properly, he should wake up and be able to talk." Marcus found himself holding his breath along with everyone else crowded into the small room. 3 nurses, 2 doctors, 1 respiratory therapist and 1 desperate father all watched Jake Thompson as if they could will life back into his small body through sheer collective attention and hope. The waiting was excruciating. Marcus checked his watch obsessively, counting every minute, every second. He found himself praying to a god he hadn't spoken to since his own childhood, making desperate bargains and promises. 18 minutes after the last drop of tea had been administered, Dr. Mitchell gasped audibly. His oxygen saturation is improving. It just jumped from 78% to 85%. At 22 minutes, Jake's lips began showing the first hints of pink instead of that terrifying blue-black color that had made him look like a corpse. 37 minutes. His breathing became noticeably deeper and more regular, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm that looked almost normal. 45 minutes. The heart monitor began showing a steady, strong rhythm instead of the weak, irregular beats that had been failing just an hour before. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," Dr. Mitchell murmured, staring at the monitors in complete medical wonder. His vitals are not just stabilizing, they're actually returning to normal ranges. In 20 years of emergency medicine, I've never seen a recovery this dramatic. Marcus felt tears he didn't know he'd been holding back finally spill down his cheeks, running unashamed down his face and dripping onto his expensive suit. "Lucy, I don't know how to even begin thanking you. You've given me my son's life back." Lucy was still focused intently on Jake, checking his pulse the way her grandmother had taught her, counting the beats and feeling for strength and regularity. "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Thompson. We need to make sure the poison is completely neutralized and out of his system. Sometimes, with this particular combination, it can come back stronger if the person's immune system is weak or if they have any other health problems." But as they all watched in amazement, Jake's color continued to improve steadily. His breathing became strong and regular. The heart monitor showed a rhythm that grew more normal and healthy with each passing minute, as if they were watching time-lapse photography of a miraculous healing. 2 hours and 47 minutes after drinking Lucy's carefully prepared remedy, Jake Thompson opened his bright blue eyes and looked directly at his father. "Dad," he whispered, his voice weak but completely clear and coherent. "What happened? Why am I in the hospital? And why does everyone look like they've been crying?" Marcus nearly collapsed with relief and overwhelming gratitude as he took his son's small hand in both of his own. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here, and you're going to be perfectly fine." Jake's curious gaze shifted to Lucy, who was standing quietly nearby, still holding her grandmother's precious notebook. "Who's that girl? She has really kind eyes. She looks like an angel my mom used to tell me about." Lucy smiled genuinely for the first time since Marcus had met her, her whole face lighting up with joy at seeing Jake alert and talking. "I'm Lucy. I'm the one who found you in the park and brought you here so the doctors could help you." Jake studied her with the serious attention that children give to important things. "Thank you for saving me, Lucy. That was very brave." Over the next several hours, as Jake's strength steadily returned, and he was able to sit up and drink water on his own, Marcus found himself studying Lucy with completely new eyes. This child had not only saved his son's life through quick thinking and bravery, but had demonstrated medical knowledge that had impressed even the most experienced hospital staff. Dr. Mitchell had quietly told him that Lucy's diagnosis and treatment had been more accurate than their entire team's initial assessment. "That little girl has an intuitive understanding of toxicology that most medical students would envy," she'd said. "Where on earth did she learn all of this?" "Lucy," Marcus said quietly as they sat together in Jake's room, watching the boys sleep peacefully for the first time in days. "Earlier you mentioned that someone tried to poison your grandmother with this same combination. You said at first you thought it was another healer, but then you found out it might have been something more complicated." Lucy's expression grew troubled, and she unconsciously clutched her backpack tighter against her chest. "That's what we thought at the beginning, that it was just professional jealousy. But after Abuela died, and I was going through her things, I found papers she had hidden away. She had written down things she overheard during treatments, phone calls her patients made, conversations they had with visitors, things they said when they thought she didn't understand English well enough to follow. What kind of conversations? Business things, money things. She wrote that some of her patients weren't just sick people looking for healing. They were rich, powerful people who came to her because she could help them with problems that regular doctors couldn't fix, and because they knew she would never tell their secrets to anyone. Lucy pulled a small, carefully wrapped bundle from the bottom of her backpack. She made me promise to keep this safe, no matter what happened to me. She said that someday someone might need to know the truth about the people she helped. Marcus recognized the look of someone carrying a burden far too heavy for their years. Lucy, all this time you've been living on the streets. Where exactly have you been staying? How have you been surviving? Different places every night, so nobody can find a pattern, Lucy explained matter-of-factly. Under highway bridges when it's not raining, in empty buildings that haven't been torn down yet. Sometimes the church on Maple Street lets me sleep in the basement if I help clean up after evening services. I'm very good at hiding and being invisible when I need to be. The casual way she described this survival lifestyle broke Marcus's heart. No child should have to develop skills in being invisible, in finding shelter wherever they could, in living like a fugitive. "Mr. Thompson!" Dr. Mitchell appeared in the doorway, her expression serious and concerned. "There's something important you need to know about Jake's poisoning. We've completed much more detailed toxicology tests, and I'm afraid this wasn't a random incident." Marcus felt ice begin to form in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "The poison was administered in a very specific, calculated dosage, enough to cause serious harm and potentially death, but delivered in a way that would cause maximum suffering. Someone wanted Jake to become violently ill in a public place where his condition would be discovered. This was planned carefully and executed with medical precision." Marcus's mind began racing through horrible possibilities. "Are you saying someone deliberately targeted my 7-year-old son?" "Furthermore, Dr. Mitchell continued, her voice grim, "based on the concentration levels in his bloodstream and the way the toxins were distributed in his system, this wasn't something Jake ate or drank recently. The poison was administered slowly, probably over the course of several days, maybe even a week." Lucy sat up straighter, her young face taking on an expression of adult understanding. "That means it was someone who had access to his food and drinks regularly, someone who could give him small amounts over time without him noticing, someone he trusted." Marcus felt his world begin to crumble as the implications hit him. The household staff who prepared Jake's meals, his teachers at the private school, family friends who visited regularly and had dinner with them. And then the most horrible thought of all struck him like lightning. "Lucy, you said the poison used against your grandmother was exactly the same as what nearly killed Jake. And you said your grandmother treated wealthy, powerful people who trusted her with their secrets." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "What if whoever killed her is now targeting my family? What if this is connected?" Lucy nodded grimly, looking far older than her 7 years should allow. "My grandmother always used to say that the most dangerous enemies are the ones who live in your house and eat at your table, the ones you trust completely." At that exact moment, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was his household manager, Patricia. "Mr. Thompson, so sorry to hear about Jake's terrible accident at the park. Helena is absolutely devastated about what happened and feels responsible since she was supposed to be watching him. She's asked for a few days off to recover from the shock and guilt. I hope you understand during this difficult time. Patricia." Marcus stared at the message, his blood running completely cold. Helena had been Jake's nanny for 3 years. She had unlimited access to his food, his bedroom, his daily routine, his snacks, his drinks. She knew his schedule better than Marcus did. And now, at the exact moment when questions were being asked about the poisoning, Helena had conveniently disappeared. Lucy was watching his face carefully. "Mr. Thompson, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus showed her the text message. Lucy read it twice, then looked up at him with eyes that held far too much knowledge about the evil that people could do. "She's running," Lucy said simply. "People don't ask for time off when a child they love gets hurt. They stay close to make sure the child is okay. They ask how they can help." Marcus realized that in the space of one day, a homeless 7-year-old had not only saved his son's life, but had also possibly uncovered a conspiracy that reached into his own home. "Lucy," he said quietly, "I think we need to call the police." Detective Maria Santos had seen a lot of strange cases in her 15 years with the NYPD, but a 7-year-old homeless girl solving a sophisticated poisoning case wasn't something she encountered every day. She sat across from Marcus and Lucy in a hospital conference room, her notebook open, and her instincts telling her this case was bigger than it appeared. "Let me understand this correctly, Mr. Thompson," Detective Santos said, her pen poised over her notepad. "Your son's nanny, who has worked for your family for 3 years with an impeccable background check, suddenly requests time off immediately after your son nearly dies from a rare poison that was administered over several days?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Helena Rodriguez, 28 years old, originally from Guatemala, came to us through the most exclusive nanny agency in Manhattan. Her references were perfect, her background check was flawless, and Jake adores her." "Adored," Lucy corrected quietly. "Past tense. People don't love someone who tries to kill them." Detective Santos studied Lucy with careful attention. This little girl spoke with a directness that adults often found uncomfortable, but which Santos recognized as the voice of someone who had seen too much of the world's darkness too early. "Lucy, tell me about your grandmother's papers," Santos continued. "You mentioned she kept records of conversations her wealthy patients had. What exactly did she write down?" Lucy carefully unwrapped the bundle she'd been protecting, revealing a collection of small notebooks, loose papers, and what appeared to be photographs. Abuela was very careful. She wrote everything in code, a mixture of Spanish, some indigenous words from her village in Mexico, and symbols she made up. She taught me how to read it before she died. She opened one of the notebooks to a page covered in tiny, meticulous handwriting. "This entry is from about 6 months before she was poisoned. She treated a man with a very expensive suit who spoke with other men about problematic business partners and permanent solutions. She wrote that they mentioned names of other curanderas in the city, healers who had died in accidents or gotten very sick." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Lucy, are you saying your grandmother discovered some kind of organized effort to eliminate healers?" "Not just healers," Lucy said, her young voice carrying a weight of understanding that chilled everyone in the room. "Abuela wrote that these men talked about anyone who knew too much about their business. Healers just happen to be perfect targets because we see people when they're desperate and scared, when they tell us secrets they wouldn't tell doctors or lawyers." Detective Santos leaned forward, her investigative instincts fully engaged. "What kind of secrets?" Lucy flipped through several pages, her finger tracing lines of coded text. "Money hidden in other countries, business deals that weren't legal, people who were supposed to die in accidents but didn't, and something about children, wealthy men's children who were being used to control their fathers." The implication hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You think Jake was targeted not just to hurt him, but to control me, to make me vulnerable?" "It's a classic intimidation tactic," Detective Santos confirmed, her experience with organized crime kicking in. Harm someone's child to demonstrate power, then approach them with demands when they're emotionally destroyed and desperate. Marcus's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. The caller ID showed his head of security. "Mr. Thompson, we have a problem. Helena Rodriguez's apartment has been completely cleared out. According to neighbors, a moving truck came yesterday morning, before Jake was even found poisoned in the park." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Helena had been preparing to disappear before her plan was even executed. "Detective Santos," Marcus said, his voice taking on the steel that had built his business empire. "I want a full investigation, unlimited resources. I want to know who Helena really is, who she's working for, and how this connects to Lucy's grandmother's murder." Lucy looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too knowing for a 7-year-old. "Mr. Thompson, there's something else. The papers I've been carrying, they're not just my grandmother's notes. She made copies of documents she found in some of her patients' homes, financial papers, photographs, contracts, drafts. She said if anything happened to her, these would be evidence." Detective Santos felt her pulse quicken. "Lucy, are you saying your grandmother was building a case against these people?" "She was scared," Lucy admitted, her voice smaller now, more like the child she actually was. "In her last few weeks, she kept saying that she wished she had never learned to read English so well. She said some knowledge was too dangerous to carry." Marcus made a decision that would change everything. "Detective Santos, Lucy isn't going back to the streets. She's staying with us until this is resolved. Whoever killed her grandmother and tried to kill my son isn't going to get another chance at either of them." Lucy looked startled. "Mr. Thompson, I can't—" "You saved my son's life," Marcus interrupted firmly. "You're family now, and we protect our family." "Mum," but even as he said the words, Marcus realized he might have just made Lucy an even bigger target. 3 days later, Lucy sat in Marcus's penthouse apartment, still amazed by the luxury surrounding her. She had her own bedroom, the first real bed she'd slept in since her grandmother died, but she couldn't shake the feeling that danger was closing in around them. Jake was recovering beautifully, his natural resilience helping him bounce back faster than the doctors had expected. But Marcus had hired private security, and Lucy noticed the bodyguards stationed discreetly around the building. "Lucy," Marcus called from his study. "Detective Santos is here with some information about Helena." Lucy found them examining photographs and documents spread across Marcus's massive mahogany desk. Detective Santos looked up as she entered, her expression grim. "Helena Rodriguez doesn't exist," Santos announced without preamble. "The woman who worked for you for 3 years is actually Sofia Vega, a 32-year-old Colombian national with connections to a sophisticated international organization that specializes in infiltrating wealthy families." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. Connections to what kind of organization? "The kind that deals in information brokerage, blackmail, and what they call influence operations," Santos explained. "They place people inside wealthy households to gather intelligence, create vulnerabilities, and when necessary, eliminate threats." Lucy pulled out her grandmother's notebooks, opening to a section she had been studying. "Detective Santos, look at this. My grandmother wrote about a woman who came to her claiming to have female problems. But Abuela noticed that her hands were too soft for someone who claimed to work as a cleaning lady, and she spoke Spanish with an accent that didn't match the story she told." Santos examined the notebook entry. "What did your grandmother think?" "She thought the woman was there to learn about her other patients. Abuela wrote that she pretended to be sicker than she was and spoke only in her indigenous language during the treatment, so the woman couldn't understand what she was saying to other patients who came in." Marcus studied a surveillance photo of Sofia Helena that Santos had brought. "How long has this organization been operating?" Based on our investigation with federal partners. At least 15 years, Santos replied. They're incredibly sophisticated, deep background identities, professional training in childcare and domestic skills, psychological profiles to help them become indispensable to their target families. Lucy looked up from the notebooks, her face pale. Detective Santos, there are names in here. Other families my grandmother treated. If this organization has been placing people in wealthy homes for 15 years, then there could be dozens of families who have been compromised without knowing it. Marcus finished, the full scope of the conspiracy becoming clear. Santos nodded grimly. We're working with the FBI to identify other potential targets. But Lucy, there's something else. Your grandmother wasn't just documenting what she overheard. She was actively investigating these people. Lucy's eyes widened. What do you mean? We found evidence in her apartment. Hidden cameras she had installed, recording equipment, copies of documents she had somehow obtained. Elena Martinez was building a comprehensive case against this organization. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. That's why they killed her. She wasn't just a random healer who overheard too much. She was a threat to their entire operation. Lucy clutched her grandmother's notebook tighter. But why did they wait 2 years after killing her to come after your family? Detective Santos exchanged a look with Marcus. Because they didn't know about you, Lucy. They didn't know Elena had taught everything to her granddaughter and given you all her evidence. When you saved Jake and demonstrated your knowledge of their specific poison, I became a threat, Lucy finished, understanding flooding her young face. They realized that Abuela's investigation didn't die with her. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The little girl has something that belongs to us. Return it and no one else gets hurt. Detective Santos looked at the message, her hand instinctively moving to her service weapon. They know where you are. We need to move both of you to a secure location immediately. But Lucy was staring at her grandmother's notebook, her finger pointing to an entry near the end. Detective Santos, there's something else. Abuela wrote about a man who came to her in the last week of her life, a man who offered her a lot of money to disappear, to leave the city and never practice healing again. What did she tell him? Lucy's voice was barely a whisper. She told him that the spirits of her ancestors would never let her run from evil, and she wrote down his name. Marcus leaned over to look at the notebook. What name? Lucy looked up at them, her eyes wide with a terrible understanding. Marcus Thompson. The room fell silent except for the sound of Marcus's world crashing down around him. That's impossible, he whispered. I never met your grandmother. I would never— Not you, Lucy said quickly, seeing his confusion. Someone using your name. Someone who knew that if anything happened to her, people would think you were involved because you're rich and powerful, and you had contact with her granddaughter. Detective Santos was already on her phone, calling for backup, but Lucy was studying the notebook more carefully, her grandmother's code suddenly making perfect sense. Detective Santos, she said urgently, we need to leave right now. According to this, they're not just after the evidence. They're coming for Jake again. Tonight. Lucy's warning came just in time. As Detective Santos coordinated their emergency evacuation from Marcus's penthouse, security cameras caught movement in the building's parking garage. 3 figures in maintenance uniforms who definitely weren't there to fix anything. Safe house protocols are in effect, Santos barked into her radio as they rushed toward the service elevator. We have multiple hostiles in the building. Marcus carried a sleepy Jake, while Lucy clutched her backpack containing her grandmother's precious evidence. The little boy didn't fully understand why they were leaving in such a hurry, but he could feel the adult's tension. Dad, are the bad people coming back? Jake asked quietly. We're not going to let anyone hurt you, Marcus promised, though his heart was racing with fear. These people had already gotten close enough to poison his son slowly over several days. Who knew what else they were capable of? Lucy stayed close to Detective Santos, her young mind processing the situation with a clarity that impressed the veteran officer. Detective Santos, in my grandmother's notes, she wrote that these people always have backup plans. If they can't get what they want quietly, they'll make it loud and public. What do you mean? They'll try to make it look like Mr. Thompson is the bad guy, like he killed my grandmother and tried to kill his own son for some reason. Then when we disappear or die, everyone will think it was him covering his tracks. Santos felt ice in her veins as she realized the sophisticated nature of this conspiracy. Lucy, your grandmother was extraordinarily smart. She wasn't just investigating criminals, she was fighting a psychological warfare operation. They reached the safe house, a nondescript apartment in Queens that the NYPD used for witness protection. But as they settled in, Lucy continued studying her grandmother's notebooks with increasing urgency. "Detective Santos," she said after an hour of reading, "there's more. Abuela didn't just document what she overheard from patients. She identified the leadership structure of this organization." Marcus looked up from where he was helping Jake get settled in the strange new environment. Leadership structure. Lucy opened the notebook to a page covered with what looked like a family tree or organizational chart. She figured out that they're not just random criminals. They're connected to something much bigger, people in government, in business, in law enforcement. Santos felt her blood run cold. "Lucy, are you saying this organization has people inside the police? According to this, they have people everywhere. Banks, hospitals, schools, police departments, even some FBI officers." Lucy's voice was matter-of-fact, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. "Abuela wrote that you can't trust anyone in an official position unless you know for certain they're clean." Marcus sank into a chair, the full scope of their situation hitting him. "So we can't trust the system to protect us. We're on our own." "Not entirely," Lucy said, flipping to another page. "Abuela identified clean contacts, too, people she was certain weren't compromised. There's a federal prosecutor in Washington who's been investigating corruption, a journalist who specializes in organized crime and—" She paused, studying the handwriting carefully. "A retired FBI agent who lives here in New York." Detective Santos leaned over to look at the names. "Lucy, if your grandmother identified trustworthy federal contacts, we might be able to build a real case instead of just running and hiding." But Jake, who had been quietly playing with toys Marcus had grabbed from the apartment, suddenly spoke up. "Lucy, what if the bad people find us here too?" Lucy looked at the little boy she had saved, seeing her own childhood fears reflected in his eyes. "Jake, my grandmother always told me that the truth is stronger than lies, and love is stronger than evil. As long as we stick together and we don't give up, the good people will win." Marcus felt his heart break a little at hearing this 7-year-old comfort his son with wisdom earned through unimaginable hardship. "Lucy's right," he told Jake. "And we have something the bad people don't have." "What's that, Dad?" Marcus looked at Lucy, this extraordinary child who had walked into their lives and changed everything. "We have each other. We're a family now, and families protect each other." But even as he spoke those words, Lucy was reading another entry in her grandmother's notebook, her face growing pale. "Detective Santos," she whispered, "there's something else. According to this, they don't just eliminate threats. When they can't silence someone quietly, they stage accidents or suicides that are so convincing that no one asks questions." Santos felt the temperature in the room drop. "What kind of accidents?" Lucy's voice was barely audible. "The kind where entire families disappear and everyone assumes they went into hiding or witness protection, but they never actually make it to safety." Outside the safe house, a van with tinted windows pulled up to the curb, its occupants watching and waiting for the right moment to make their move. The call came at 3:47 in the morning. Detective Santos answered her encrypted phone, expecting an update from her backup team. Instead, she heard a voice that made her blood freeze. "Detective Santos, this is Deputy Chief Harrison. We have a problem with your witness protection situation." Lucy, who seemed to sleep with one ear open like a street animal, was instantly awake. Something in Santos's voice had changed, becoming more formal, more careful. "Sir, the witnesses are secure," Santos replied, but Lucy caught her subtle hand signal, "Danger. We need you to bring them to headquarters immediately. There's been a development in the case that requires their immediate testimony." Santos looked at Lucy, who was silently shaking her head. Something was wrong. "Sir, with respect, my orders were to maintain secure location until—" "Detective, you're being relieved of this assignment. Agent Morrison from the FBI is en route to take over. Bring the witnesses to headquarters in 1 hour." The line went dead. Santos immediately began packing their emergency gear. "We're leaving," she whispered to Marcus and Jake. "Right now." Lucy was already stuffing her grandmother's notebooks into her backpack. "Detective Santos, that wasn't a real order, was it?" "What makes you say that?" "Because my grandmother wrote about this exact scenario. When they can't get to you directly, they use official channels to force you into the open." Marcus lifted a sleepy Jake, wrapping him in a blanket. "Where do we go?" Lucy pulled out one of her grandmother's notebooks, flipping to a page marked with a red ribbon. "There's an address here. Abuela wrote that if everything went wrong, this person could be trusted absolutely." Santos looked at the address. "This is in Brooklyn, in a pretty rough neighborhood. My grandmother said the safest people often live in places where dangerous people don't want to go," Lucy explained. "And this person has been fighting the same evil for longer than anyone." As they slipped out the back exit of the safe house, Lucy's intuition proved correct. Agent Morrison and his team were already surrounding the front of the building. "How did you know?" Santos asked as they made their way through back alleys toward the subway. Lucy's answer chilled everyone. "Because my grandmother wrote that they always give you exactly 1 hour, long enough for you to panic and make mistakes, but not long enough to think of a real escape plan." The address led them to a small apartment above a bodega in Sunset Park. An elderly black woman answered the door, taking one look at Lucy and immediately pulling them inside. "You must be Eleanor's granddaughter," she said without preamble. "I'm Rose Washington. Your grandmother and I worked together for many years." Lucy's eyes widened. "You're a curandera too." "I'm many things, child, including someone who's been fighting the same organization that killed your grandmother." Rose locked multiple deadbolts behind them. "Elena told me before she died that if anything happened to her, you would carry on her work." Marcus felt like he was in a dream. "Mrs. Washington, what exactly was my son's grandmother investigating?" Rose led them to a back room that looked like a combination library, medical clinic, and research center. The walls were covered with photographs, documents, newspaper clippings, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment. "She was documenting a conspiracy that goes back decades," Rose explained. "Wealthy families being infiltrated and manipulated by an organization that specializes in gathering secrets and eliminating threats. Your family was targeted not just for money, but because Marcus Thompson Industries has defense contracts that provide access to sensitive government information." Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. "They weren't just trying to control me personally, they wanted access to my company's classified projects." Lucy was studying the wall of evidence with the intensity of someone much older. "Mrs. Washington, my grandmother's notes mention something called the collection. What is that?" Rose's expression grew even more serious. "Children, Mr. Thompson, the ultimate leverage. They don't just infiltrate families, they collect children from wealthy, powerful families to ensure long-term control." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Jake wasn't just being poisoned, Marcus whispered. He was being prepared for kidnapping. Rose nodded grimly. The poison was designed to make him chronically ill, dependent on medical care that only certain people could provide. Once they had him in their medical facility, he would have disappeared from your life gradually, naturally, with you being grateful for their help. Detective Santos was studying the surveillance equipment. Mrs. Washington, how long have you been documenting this? 23 years, Rose replied, ever since they killed my daughter for getting too close to the truth. Lucy looked up at her with understanding and sympathy that no child should possess. That's why you and my grandmother worked together. You both lost people you loved. And now, Rose said, looking directly at Marcus, we have a chance to stop them permanently, but it's going to require something very dangerous. Marcus didn't hesitate. Whatever it takes. Rose smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. Elena always said you were a good man, Mr. Thompson. Even before she met you, she knew the kind of person you were by the way Lucy talked about Jake and how much you loved your son. Marcus stared at her in confusion. Mrs. Washington, I never met Elena. Lucy and I just met a few days ago. Rose and Lucy exchanged a look. Mr. Thompson, Lucy said quietly, there's something I haven't told you yet. My grandmother didn't just treat random wealthy patients. She was specifically assigned to your case 6 months ago by the same organization that sent Helena into your house. Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. What are you saying? I'm saying, Rose finished, that Elena Martinez was originally sent to gather information about your family, but she chose to protect you instead of betraying you, and that decision cost her her life. The revelation about Lucy's grandmother hit Marcus like a physical blow, but there was no time to process the emotional complexity. Rose Washington had a plan that could expose the entire conspiracy, but it required using Jake as bait, something that went against every parental instinct Marcus possessed. Absolutely not, Marcus said firmly when Rose explained her strategy. I will not put my son in danger again. Lucy looked up from her grandmother's notebook, where she'd been studying the organizational chart. Mr. Thompson, my grandmother wrote something here about Jake specifically. She said that the reason they chose your family wasn't random. Rose nodded gravely. Elena discovered that Jake has a very rare blood type, AB negative, with additional unique markers. There are fewer than 200 people in the world with his exact profile. Detective Santos felt ice form in her stomach. What does that mean? It means Jake isn't just valuable for controlling Marcus, Rose explained. He's valuable for medical reasons that go far beyond what we've discussed. Lucy's voice was barely a whisper as she read from her grandmother's notes. Abuela wrote that they're not just collecting children for leverage, they're collecting them for medical harvesting. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus felt rage and terror war in his chest. What kind of medical harvesting? Rose's expression was grim. Bone marrow, organs, blood, anything that could save the lives of the organization's leadership or their own children. Jake's blood type makes him particularly valuable because it's universal for certain rare diseases. So they were planning to keep him alive but use him as a living medical resource, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Lucy closed the notebook and looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Thompson, they're not going to stop. Even if we hide forever, even if we change our names and move to another country, they'll keep hunting us, because Jake is too valuable and I know too much. Detective Santos was pacing, her training warring with the horrible reality they faced. Rose, what exactly is your plan? We give them what they think they want, Rose explained, pulling out surveillance equipment that looked more sophisticated than anything the police used. We let them capture Jake, but we make sure he's protected and that we can track everything they do. Are you insane? Marcus exploded. I said no! Lucy put her small hand on Marcus's arm. "Mr. Thompson, listen to her. My grandmother wrote about this plan. She knew someday it might be the only way to save everyone." Rose continued calmly. "Jake would wear a tracking device that looks like a medical alert bracelet. He'd have a two-way communication system. And most importantly, he'd be carrying something that would expose their entire operation the moment they brought him to their main facility." "What kind of something?" Lucy opened her backpack and pulled out a small device that looked like an inhaler. "My grandmother built this before she died. It's designed to release an aerosol that marks everyone in a room with a chemical that shows up under special UV light. Once they're marked, law enforcement can identify every member of their organization, no matter where they go." Marcus stared at the device. "Your grandmother built a chemical tracking system." "Abuela was a chemist before she became a healer," Lucy explained. "She came to America with a degree in biochemistry, but her English wasn't good enough for professional jobs, so she used her knowledge to help people as a curandera." Rose activated several pieces of monitoring equipment. Elena spent 2 years developing this plan. Jake would be protected, the organization would be exposed, and most importantly, hundreds of other families would be saved. Detective Santos looked at the surveillance setup. "Rose, this is incredibly sophisticated. How do you have access to this equipment?" Rose smiled for the first time since they'd met her. "Because I'm not just a healer, detective. I'm a retired CIA operative who's been conducting an unauthorized investigation into this organization for over 2 decades. Marcus felt his understanding of everything shift again. "The government knows about this? Certain elements within the government are this organization," Rose replied. "That's why Elena and I had to work outside official channels. That's why Detective Santos couldn't trust her own chain of command." Lucy was studying Jake, who had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by the stress and uncertainty of the past few days. "Jake is stronger than people think. He survived the poisoning because he has a fighter's spirit. He could do this." Marcus knelt down beside his son, watching Jake sleep peacefully, despite everything that had happened. "Jake, can you wake up for a minute? We need to talk to you about something very important." Jake opened his blue eyes, immediately alert, despite having been asleep moments before. "Dad, are we going to fight the bad people now?" The question, asked with such innocent determination, broke Marcus's heart and filled him with pride at the same time. "Jake, there's something very dangerous we might need to do to keep you safe and to protect other children like you, but it means you would have to be very brave." Jake sat up, looking more serious than any 7-year-old should have to look. "Lucy was brave when she saved me. I can be brave too." Lucy came over and sat next to Jake. "Jake, if we do this, you have to promise to follow the plan exactly. No trying to be a hero, no changing what we tell you to do. Just be smart and careful and trust that we'll come get you." Jake nodded solemnly. "Will you come with me?" Lucy shook her head. "I can't. They want to capture me too, but separately." "But Jake, I promise you, we will not let anything bad happen to you. Your dad loves you too much to let you get hurt." Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he realized his 7-year-old son was about to voluntarily walk into the most dangerous situation imaginable, and that a 7-year-old homeless girl had become the moral center of their entire fight for survival. "Okay," Jake said simply. "When do we start?" Rose began activating communication equipment that would coordinate what might be the most important sting operation in decades. "We start tomorrow, and if this works, we're going to save a lot of families." But Lucy was reading the final pages of her grandmother's notebook, and her face had gone pale. "Mrs. Washington, there's something else. Something Abuela wrote in her last entry before she died." "What is it, child?" Lucy's voice was barely audible. "She wrote that the organization has a fail-safe plan. If they're ever in danger of being exposed completely, they activate something called final collection. They grab every target they've been monitoring and disappear permanently. Rose felt her blood run cold. How many families are they monitoring? Lucy counted entries in the notebook. According to this, 47 families across the United States, including children. Marcus realized they weren't just fighting for Jake's life anymore. They were fighting for the lives of dozens of children whose families had no idea they were in danger. "Then we don't have a choice," he said, his voice filled with grim determination. "We end this tomorrow." The plan unfolded perfectly. At 9:15 a.m., Marcus walked into Central Park with Jake, both wearing hidden cameras and tracking devices. Lucy watched from the surveillance van, gripping her grandmother's chemical tracking device. "Dad, I'm scared," Jake whispered. "I know, buddy, but Lucy and Rose are watching. You're never alone." The abduction happened exactly as predicted. A fake social worker approached. Then men with badges appeared, leading Jake away for a child endangerment investigation. Lucy activated the aerosol device as Jake entered an office building in the financial district. Dozens of people throughout the building were instantly marked with invisible chemical traces. "This is bigger than we thought," Rose breathed, watching the monitors. "It's a complete shadow organization." But the biggest shock came when Jake's hidden camera revealed his interrogator. "Hello, Jake," said a familiar voice. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Aunt Patricia is here." Marcus felt his world collapse. Patricia Morrison, his household manager for 7 years, the woman who'd helped raise Jake, who'd recommended Helena, sat across from his son in the organization's command center. "I don't understand," Marcus whispered. "Patricia is family. She's been with us since Jake was born." Lucy looked up with sympathy. "My grandmother wrote about this. The deepest betrayals come from people who make themselves indispensable." On screen, Patricia spoke warmly to Jake. "Your daddy's been keeping secrets. Did you know your blood is very special? So special it can save important people's lives?" Jake, following their practiced script, asked innocently, "What important people?" "Dissy. Rich people, powerful people who make the rules. In return for helping them, your daddy becomes even more successful." Marcus felt sick, realizing Patricia's years of manipulation. Every decision about Jake's care had positioned him for this moment. Jake surprised everyone with his next question. "Aunt Patricia, if this is so good, why did Helena poison me?" Patricia's warmth turned clinical. "Sometimes we must make people sick before making them better. It teaches appreciation for good health." "Did you kill Lucy's grandmother?" Jake asked with stunning courage. Patricia's mask dropped completely. That old woman should have minded her business. She was supposed to gather information quietly, not play detective and threaten our operation. "So you murdered her?" "I eliminated a threat," Patricia said coldly. "Just like I'll eliminate that street girl causing us trouble." The FBI burst through the doors. The raid became the largest takedown of international conspiracy in decades. Patricia's files revealed 20 years of infiltrating families, using children for leverage in business deals and medical harvesting. 3 hours later, Jake was safe in Marcus's arms. "Dad," Jake said quietly, "Aunt Patricia mentioned other children like me, kids with no families to save them." Lucy looked up from packing her grandmother's notebooks. "Jake's right. There are 12 children in facilities across the country." Marcus made his decision. "Then we're not done. Those children need rescue." Detective Santos smiled. "With Elena's evidence and today's documentation, we can shut down their entire network." Lucy nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother said the most important healing happens in families, people who choose to love and protect each other, even without blood relations." Marcus knelt to Lucy's level. "Lucy Martinez, you saved my son's life, exposed this conspiracy, and showed us real courage." "Mr. Thompson." You taught me family isn't about blood or money. It's about standing together when everything goes wrong. Jake took Lucy's hand. Lucy, will you be my sister? For real this time. Lucy looked at them, these people who'd become her world in 1 week. Are you sure? I only know survival and healing. Marcus stood with certainty. Surviving and healing are exactly what our family needs. We choose you, your home. 6 months later, Lucy Martinez Thompson taught Jake to identify medicinal plants in their garden. She was passing her grandmother's knowledge to the boy who'd become her brother in every way that mattered. Marcus watched from the kitchen window, amazed by how this extraordinary girl had transformed their lives. Conspiracy trials were ongoing. 12 children had been rescued, and the Marcus Thompson Foundation for Child Protection was protecting other families. Lucy, Jake called from the garden, tell me about Abuela Elena and her bravery. Lucy smiled peacefully. Well, mijo, she always said love is the strongest medicine in the world. Sometimes, when you love someone enough, you can heal impossible things. Marcus joined his children in the afternoon sunlight. Family, he'd learned, wasn't about shared blood or names. It was choosing to stand together, protect each other, and heal wounds with unconditional love. As Lucy continued teaching Jake, Marcus realized Elena Martinez had given them more than wisdom and courage. She'd proven that even in darkness, when evil seems overwhelming, family love can overcome anything. Sometimes the most broken people, a homeless girl and a father who nearly lost everything, create something stronger and more beautiful than either imagined possible.